Hi, this is Micornus Phokane, the leader and the founder of Church Governance Solutions. I want to speak today about simple ways of saving cost in your church. And I'm sure you would understand that it's very important that we save cost in the church so that the church can be able to run, because the church needs finances. And also the fact that we know that we're struggling as churches to actually get funding, because our own members actually end up not even contributing towards the running of the church itself. So you would find many churches are suffering financially. And this is the reason why we will address this topic, that while you're not having enough funding coming in, it is very important as well, therefore, to take care of the little finances that you have. And that's the reason why we need to address this, that you need to save the cost by all means as well. Now, the first thing that I want us to look at, if you are to save cost as a church or as leaders of church, is to avoid renting expensive places. Avoid renting expensive places for a church, because a church doesn't have much funding, as we are saying. So start, therefore, if you're starting a church, in a small place within maybe the vicinity of your own space, which could be your living room at home, it could be your garage at home, or the back room at your house, whereby you don't have to be paying anything in the meantime. So start there and make sure that you grow the church steadily to a level where the church can be able to finance itself. I have seen several times where ministers start churches in very expensive rental places. And when you start there, you basically likely going to get yourself discouraged, because you're going to reach a stage where you cannot pay the rent. Then it looks like, therefore, you are a failure. And also, you will start pressurizing your own members, who will, of course, be very few by that time. Maybe just a few members of your family that you've started with. But yet, because you're renting an expensive place, you may find it difficult and steep for you to afford the rent, and that will actually disturb the running of the church, and you may find yourself discouraging yourself, as I've mentioned earlier. So this is very important, therefore, that when you are going to start a church or you're running a church, look at the expenses that you're spending for rental. Try not to rent expensive places, because if you do so, as I said, it will actually squeeze you financially to an extent that you'll feel like you're a failure. Secondly, buy quality instead of cheap breakable instruments, because there are those people that would actually say, because we're saving cost, therefore let us buy cheaper instruments. We're saving cost, therefore let us buy what we can afford for now. But I want to emphasize that quality should be actually more preferred than quantity. You may have a lot of instruments that are cheap and breakable. That will cost you quite a lot, because the turnaround for fixing those instruments, the money that you spend for fixing those instruments may be actually beyond you. And it's actually at the level sometimes where it is difficult actually to be fixing them, to such an extent that you'll end up condemning those, because you just cannot fix them anymore. So therefore, that will be costly exercise than if from the beginning you decide to buy quality stuff. So please, as a leader of the church or a visionary, so please always prefer to buy the products that you're going to use, quality instruments that you're using, that will last you longer, because the longevity of your product saves you. Because you may actually feel, I'm spending less now, but the fact that you're going to have them breaking and buying frequently instruments that will replace those that have broken, and also maybe also the fixing, as I said, and the maintenance of those products or those equipments may be very, very expensive to do so. So please be careful as a leader, be careful as a visionary, that you don't go for cheap equipment, because they will cost you. Rather go for quality that will be having good longevity and not cost you much in maintenance at all. Now, the other thing that you would actually look at if you want to save cost in your church, make sure that your church runs well with enough finances, with the cost saved, is please use reliable people to handle finances. please use reliable people to handle finances. I'm mentioning this one because when you have unreliable people that are handling finances, the little that gets in will actually be going out, because people will actually spend that money without faith, without being faithful on it. And that's the problem that we have when we have people that are not reliable in the church, who would actually misappropriate the funds, who would misappropriate the money, who would actually make corruption with the money by stealing or thieving the very same money from the basket, that they will put their hands in the cookie jar. You know people that would actually do that. And I'm sure many we have trusted people just because they are people of church. But I want to emphasize that we're having a lot of people that are in church that are not totally converted in their hearts. They are not totally sold out to the gospel of Christ. So therefore, because they are not converted completely, therefore, they will still be having behaviors and habits that are untoward. Those habits that will put hands in the cookie jar and make sure that they actually deplete the very same little funds that you have. And I'm sure some of you as church leaders, some of you as pastors, ministers, visionaries that have run your church, you would agree with me that you've realized that there are many of the churches that are having people that are not faithful at all, and the monies are actually getting lost. The monies are actually not reaching the bank. The money are just not actually appropriated well. So therefore, money's getting lost. They're actually drifting you backwards and delaying the progress of the ministry. And therefore, please get people that are faithful with money, people that don't steal money, people that don't make money disappear. And this is very important. And I know in many churches, many ministers would agree with me that the monies get disappearing because of the very same people that are counting the money, the very same people that are managing the money, the very same people that are taking the money to the bank. So they need to be faithful people. So that's very important that you do so, and that will save you the cost of the finances that you are having. Avoid full-time workers in a small church, because sometimes we are quick to employ people, we are quick to get full-time workers, we are quick to put people on the salary bill, and you find that the church cannot afford, because it must be dependent on the finances for us to decide when, therefore, to employ people. When can we put people on the salary bill? Because we cannot rush to employ people, put them on the salary bill while the church is still very small. And the church cannot afford to pay those people salaries. And that is the reason why many churches unfold and crumble, because they've got people on the bill, on the salary bill, and it's a major cost. And therefore you'll realize that because they cannot afford that, then the church cannot actually run adequately, because they are paying salaries of people and yet they cannot afford that. And we have seen this happening, and I want to advise pastors, ministers, I want to advise your apostles and those leaders of churches and visionaries that please calculate properly, see if it's necessary, and otherwise let people volunteer or use volunteers rather than employing people full-time in a small church that cannot afford salaries of people. And we've seen this happening, and therefore there's no rush in paying people salaries. Let people volunteer, therefore. Because a church organization is a volunteering organization. And it must depend generally on people that volunteer. And only at the right time, when the church is matured enough or grown financially to a level where you can employ people full time and pay them, that's then that you can start deciding to employ people, therefore, and not rush to employ people while you cannot afford them. That's very key that we emphasize that. But I must also mention that you should avoid frequent invitation of guest speakers. And I've seen churches that run on guest speakers, because inviting guest speaker becomes quite an expensive exercise. And there are topics that you can yourself address them in your own church. And I've seen ministers that are actually afraid to address certain topics in their own churches, and they feel that somebody from outside should come and address this topic. particularly when it comes to topics regarding money, and you find that somebody cannot address that in their own church. They want to get somebody who would come from outside to come and address that. But the fact that you're inviting somebody, remember, you're going to pay that person. The fact that you get a guest speaker, therefore, you have to reimburse them because they are traveling, they are using their own petrol, they're using their own time. Of course, you need to reimburse them, but that becomes expensive exercise because at the smaller scale, when the church is not grown enough to be able to invite guest speakers, so please avoid that because that might actually be eating up to the coffers of the church, therefore starting to deplete the finances in the church just because you're running the church based on guest speakers. So therefore, this is very important sometimes to also develop your own people within the church. It could be brothers in the church that could be addressing certain topics. So please use those. Brothers, sisters in the church that might be au fait with certain topics. So please use them. Let them address the church in that regard, rather than getting somebody from outside who will come and address that topic, and you have to reimburse those people. So therefore, get volunteers from the same church. Let them address some of the topics that you can address, and don't rely on guest speakers to run a church. That's very, very key as well, particularly in smaller churches. I must also mention the fact that you need to avoid inviting international speakers if the locals can do the job in a certain topic. And we have seen this in conferences because another thing that has been very common is that people would love to go to overseas themselves. They would love to go and minister overseas. Now, in order to try to do that, what they would do is they would actually indebt themselves by inviting people from overseas in order to source out what we call a return match or return invitation, whereby if I invite somebody from overseas, this person is likely to invite me back overseas because my aspiration is to go overseas. But I want to urge ministers of the gospel, pastors, so please be careful because if you're going to invite somebody from overseas, one, you must fly them. You must actually get them tickets to fly, to come. Secondly, you must also still make sure that you accommodate them in a very comfortable accommodation. Of course, many times then you would actually book them in a hotel. And thirdly, there's also honorarium, which is now the reimbursement of their travels or thank you for their travels, which will be what we call honorarium. And that is not a cheap money when you've got somebody from far to travel to over this side to come and minister. So if the topic can be addressed by somebody locally, or even locally, meaning your own church, if there's somebody who can address it. If it's a topic that you can address it by yourself, why not? So please make sure that you address those topics that you need to address, or get the people locally that can address topics, rather than getting somebody international for the topic that can be addressed locally. That will save your cost. Finally, I want to just mention that please, when you organize conferences based on budget as well. And don't just organize so many conferences that are meaningless at the end because you're spending a lot of money to organize conferences. So therefore, let conferences be meaningful. Let them be to the minimal. Let them be also managed properly according to your budget. So please make sure that you don't rush into making mega conferences that you cannot afford, massive the conferences that you cannot afford financing, because it's very important that you don't deplete the little finances that you have that you may need actually to run the church day to day. Operationally, you still need money, so therefore you need to pay the bills for the church, accommodation for the church. You need to make sure water, electricity are being paid, and also you are able to buy those things that need to be bought, like instruments. So you don't need to deplete the whole money because you want to organize a conference that you want to impress people with, instead of just running a very adequate, easy conference that is manageable and that is great to organize. So I want to end up here today. I hope that you've learned quite a bit out of this. Your host, Micornus Phokane. Thank you very much for listening to us and be part of this great topic. And I hope you'll join us tomorrow as we deal with another topic. But remember also to visit our socials, our YouTube channel, Micornus Phokane. And I want you to go even on our Facebook page, Micornus Phokane and Church Governance Solutions. Like those pages and make sure that you click the notification button on those as well, so that you may be notified when we put up some videos of this sort. And I believe that you'll learn out of that. May the good Lord bless you and allow us to check out today and say, join us tomorrow. And cheers for now.